People in high conflict situations, they assume the worst intention of the other person. No matter what is said, no matter how plainly it is said, and it could be very neutral or even positive, the other person, because of how conflicted their relationship is, always assumes the worst intention out of the other person. And they do it with each other. It's a cycle. It's back and forth like a tennis match. And so no matter what is proposed, no matter what is discussed, no matter what is verbalized, it's always going to raise, what did you just say? No, and it's going to make a conflict. And I've seen it time and time again. Somebody will say something absolutely benign. Nothing. It means there was no intent behind it. And I can see the other person going, wait, what? Getting all upset and getting all twisted out of shape.
Welcome to the Divorce Discussions Podcast, where professionals share practical guidance to help you move through divorce with clarity and confidence. Let's get into the discussion. Have you ever been in an argument and thought, how did we even get here? Maybe it started over something small like dishes or schedules or who said what, but somehow it turned into something so much bigger. Today's guest has spent decades helping families through some of the most emotionally charged moments of their life, first as a therapist and now as a family mediator. And he's going to take us all the way back to the root of all of it. Not just the divorce conflict, not just a co-parenting conflict, but the basic cause of personal conflict, period. Because once you understand where conflict actually comes from, you can start to change everything. Welcome to Divorce Discussions. I'm your host, Angie Weber, the director at the Divorce Support Collective, where we are on a mission to reimagine the process of divorce through collaboration and support. And today, I am so excited to be joined by Adya Riss, family mediator that specializes in helping parents help their young kids through the divorce process. In addition, as a former therapist, he works with a lot of couples in high emotion, high conflict mediations. Adya has been mediating for decades and loves the opportunity to assist people through challenging times in their life. And I want to say thank you so much for joining me today and my listeners, Adya.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I think probably during, that intro, there were probably some listeners saying, no, I know where the conflict started. It was over the dishes or it was over the scheduling conflicts. But why don't we just get straight into it? Where does conflict actually come from? What is the basis behind it?
Angie, that's a great question. And when I first started out as a therapist and then also again as a mediator, I really had to deal directly with conflict and why I had people coming into my office and immediately attacking each other. And a lot of times it was over something very, 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 very small. It wasn't worth the trouble, if I can use that phrase, because of what they were arguing about was just so small. And so I started paying attention to how they were arguing. And it became quite evident that that's really the problem. And so I always, when I do a presentation on conflict, I always ask the people that I'm talking to have them imagine the last conflict they were in. You don't have to say it out loud, Angie, but imagine the last conflict you were in. And in doing that, I want to add, this is what I'm going to ask you. What really was the disagreement about? Was it small? Was it large? Was it? Would you volunteer that?
Yeah, I feel like it probably was something small that maybe didn't get communicated correctly. And then maybe I sat with it and got annoyed or upset about it. And then once the time actually comes to bring it up, it kind of snowballed into a bigger issue than it really needed to in the beginning.
Right. And frequently with conflict, the actual disagreement is not really the heart of why two or more people have this conflict. Let me ask you this. If there was a disagreement, was there something that made it worse?
I feel like the more time, like without the communication is usually what makes it worse, because then when you're already highly activated, like I can just speak in my own marriage, if I'm sitting on something for a while, and this used to happen before we had tools and strategies to communicate better, it would turn into this, well, you did this a couple weeks ago and it made me so angry. And now you did something else to kind of perturb me a little bit. So now I'm really angry and I'm going to bring it up.
Right. And so a lot of times it's not the actual disagreement. Most of the time it's not the actual disagreement. It's what happens beside that.
Yeah.
And what I focus on is the listening that happens between the two people I'm working with. Poor listening is a fundamental cause of conflicts. And good listening, this is on the other side, and good listening is the best way to resolve them.
Yeah.
Okay, when two people don't communicate correctly, or not correctly, or very well, conflicts, having more and more conflicts is their destiny. It's just going to happen again and again and again. And so let me ask you this: when you don't feel listened to, what are some of the emotions that you may feel?
Yeah, I think you feel invalued. You feel kind of pushed aside. You could feel annoyed. I think there's a whole basket of emotions that probably go into
Disrespected,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Disrespected, invalidated, right? And this is the interesting thing: even if the outcome is something that you are in favor of, okay, even if the outcome of the conflict is something you're in favor of, people still experience anger and defensiveness from not being heard. Okay, so even if you walk away from the conflict and you got what you wanted, people still feel angry because they just weren't heard. And so the key idea from this concept is that conflict escalates when people feel ignored, not necessarily when there's a disagreement.
Yeah.
So that's really the basis of what I try to work with my clients on. I did that when I was a therapist, but then now as a mediator, they come in and some of my clients come in and they're very cooperative and they're actually looking out for each other and those are kind of breaths of fresh air. But I do get a lot of clients. Most of my clients come in and they just don't know how to communicate what they want, and they also don't know how to hear what the other person wants. They go into this immediate defensive posture, and it just doesn't do it. It makes it the only thing that it makes is it's a constant battle.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Do you know why emojis were developed for text messaging?
No.
There's the sole reason why emojis were developed, because I'm not sure if you're old enough. I am. But the sole reason why emojis were developed was because we miss out on so much information when we text. We
Mm.
don't see the person's face. We don't see their body language. We don't hear the intonation of their voice. So you can't tell the difference between something that was sent in a negative manner and something that was sent in a neutral or positive manner.
Yeah.
And so they developed they developed emojis after text messaging came out, and that that was meant to provide us with a way of understanding intonation and mood with the message. And so poor listening, when we don't hear what the other person wants in a conflict, this poor listening forces us to fill in the gaps. Okay, if you don't know the whole meaning behind what somebody was saying, we fill in the gaps with assumptions. And what do humans do when we assume? We usually assume the worst, right?
Mm.
We also interpret tone. If we're not listening to the words that somebody's saying, we interpret their tone as negative. Okay,
Yeah.
instead of listening to the content of their words, we're listening to the tone of their voice. And somebody could be speaking very passionately, maybe a little loud, maybe the words are a little, over the top. I mean, the tone is a little over the top, but they could be just talking about how much they love the other person. But when you interpret that, when you interpret their message just by the tone of their voice, we tend to assume the worst, especially if they're talking loud. And so the problem is that we assume negative intent with the person that we're in conflict with. If we don't know if we're not really listening, we assume a negative intent, and that just adds more and more and more to the conflict.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many good perspectives here. And I feel like maybe you were listening in on some conversations I've been having with my children about text and like, how you can't always figure out what people are trying to say through
Right.
text messaging. But I think again, it's a great reminder, for kids, but it's a great reminder for us as adults, because I know that in my personal marriage too, like that was something we really did have to figure out is what are you actually saying? Because there was some times when I felt like I was speaking perfectly good English. And it's like, did you just hear gibberish? Like, what do you mean that's what you thought that I said? And I'm sure in your practice too, you come into contact with that a lot when a couple comes in. Let's say for mediation in this case, because I know you work with a lot of high conflict situations as well. I'm sure a couple comes in and one piece of them are like, I don't know. They just don't want to listen. I don't know. I say everything perfectly clear. I tell them exactly what I want, and they just don't do anything about it. How do you handle that when, there's being so much blame put on the one partner for all of the conflict and very little responsibility on the person who is upset or not feeling valued?
Well, interesting that you brought that up, because it has happened on a number of occasions in which I'll have two clients come in. We'll either be talking on Zoom or, in pre-COVID, I used to do a lot more in-person mediations, but
Yeah.
they'll be talking back and forth, arguing for the same thing.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is they just don't realize it. They are going back and forth, arguing for the same thing. And it was really an amazing time the first time I experienced that, because I'm sitting there going, there's no way. In my head, I'm thinking, there's no way they're arguing for the same thing, but they are. And I'll let them discuss it for a little while, and then I'll say, do you two realize that you're arguing for the exact same thing? You both want the same thing. You're in agreement with each other. And then they immediately say, no. This is what I want. And then the other person will say, well, this is what I want. And then they'll look at each other and go, because it just clicks to them, and that they want the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing. And then that's when we really start talking about listening, and saying, okay, this is what we need to focus on. And so when I see that they're in conflict, I ask them to practice repeating what the other person said. Okay. And so we do a lot of tuning in exercises so that they can really listen to each other. And it brings the temperature in the room much farther down, and makes mediation a lot more possible when I can get them to genuinely listen to each other. One of the things that I see a lot of people doing, and it's not just in mediation, it's human nature in conflict, is we do something that's called listening to respond, not really to understand. Okay? And everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what situation you're in life, everybody does it, because you want to win that conflict. You want to win that argument, right? And how are you going to win that argument? You're going to be the most prepared whenever you have to talk. So we listen to respond, not to understand. So what are you doing when you're arguing with somebody? What are you doing in the back of your head?
Oh,
Angie?
yeah. You're already thinking about what am I going to say back to prove my point?
Right. And so if you're thinking in your head, oh, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, and that's going to sound really good, and this is going to make a really good point. And what are you not doing?
Not listening.
Right. You're preparing your rebuttal. And all you're doing is waiting for that pause, waiting for that other person to pause. And then you're going to throw out your rebuttal. And what's going to happen as soon as you start talking?
Yeah.
They're going to be coming up with
the same thing.
Right. And so when you listen to respond, not to understand, it turns conversations into debates.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such valuable information because I know too, like the power of, what you were saying, like tuning in, like really making sure we're understanding. So like mirroring what the other person is saying by just taking that moment instead of debating or responding just to respond or to make your point, say, this is what I heard. And I encourage parents to do that all the time with their relationships, but also with their kids, so that if there is a misconception or miscommunication, we can stop it right at the beginning versus letting it go on and on and on.
It's
And
called
then,
active listening.
yeah. And then having you have to point out, like, do you understand? You both wanted the same thing. So
And
I
I
really
love
hope,
seeing their face when they
yeah,
realize that they're in agreement, and they finally realize it. They're like, oh, and they just have
yeah,
this blank look on their face, and I love that because it's a milestone in the development of getting them to talk to each other and to hear each other and to understand each other.
yeah. And I hope that the listeners kind of had a light bulb moment right there,
Yeah,
as you just went through that whole thing of like, oh, wait a minute. Are we saying the same thing? Do we want the same thing? But we've been so caught up in our emotions and this idea of conflict, especially while going through a divorce. Have we been really fighting over nothing? And
right.
so my question for you is, if someone is saying, oh, yeah, maybe we have been saying the same thing in different ways. We're also creatures of habit. So becoming a better listener might sound a little easier than it actually is. So what tips would you give to the listeners that are thinking, okay, I need to take a step back. I need to listen, not to respond. But how do I start making those changes, especially if it's been a little bit more high conflict leading up to now?
Well, one of the initial things I do with my clients is I get them to slow down.
Yeah.
Conflict, it's human nature that conflicts have to happen at a very high rate of speed.
Yeah.
And by slowing down, taking a breath, focusing on the person's words, putting their emotions aside, it helps to get them to understand the words. You're probably able to hear my words a little bit better when I slow my speech down.
Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to when I'm really talking like this, and I'm all hyped up, and it's a lot more to take in. It's a lot easier to just let it gloss over my conscience, and but slow down, say what you want, focus on a few short words to express what your needs are. When listening is poor, um, people hear demands rather than needs. Okay, when they're not really focusing on the other person's words, they think all that's coming their way are orders, are demands. When in fact, if you slow down and you listen to the person's words, you can hear what they truly need. Let me give you an example. How about if you're in a conflict and you hear "you never help"? What could that mean?
I think right away, like, oh, you don't see the value in what I do. What do you mean I don't help? I'm constantly doing stuff. How do you not see that?
But you're right now, Angie, you're defending yourself. If
Mm,
if you and I were in a conflict and I said, "You never help," slow down a second. Why am I saying that?
you're
What
feeling
do I
invalued.
mean? What? Right.
I would assume that you were feeling invalued.
Right. I say, maybe I feel overwhelmed. Maybe I feel like I'm just doing so much. I need help from you. Or how about if I said, "This isn't fair"? What could I mean? I mean, it's human nature for you to go straight into a defensive mode because they're saying something about you. But how can you lower the temperature of the conflict if you understood what I said? What could that mean if I said, "This isn't fair"? What's not fair?
Yeah.
Like for example, I feel excluded, or I don't feel like I'm getting a fair shake in this situation.
Hmm.
Um, so in arguments, we as human beings, when we hear something, when somebody says "you never help" or "this isn't fair," we feel like we have to defend ourselves,
Mm.
and that's not going to decrease the conflict. So when I'm working with my clients, I want them to understand what the other person's asking for. They may not say it in the best words, you never help. That's not saying it in the best way, but if the other person can understand, okay, she's or he is saying that I never help. What does that mean? Maybe they need help with something. Maybe they feel overwhelmed. Maybe I need to ask if there's some area that I could step up in. And it by just exploring that concept, just exploring what he or she said, that can help the situation. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in a high conflict situation, and when I can get them to start talking to each other, understanding each other, acknowledging each other, you can see their body language start to relax. Instead of instead of being in this tense, I gotta fight, I gotta fight. They relax into the chair, and so much stuff gets done right at that moment. And that's when mediation can really be helpful, is when they start to work together, with each other, as opposed to battling.
Yeah. Yeah, so good because, and this is exactly, again, the mission that we have at the Divorce Support Collective is help reimagine the process of divorce through collaboration and support. And this is one of the ways that couples who are divorcing can get support is by really being able to get professional support. That's not necessarily hey, you go find the best lawyer. I'm going to find the best lawyer. And we're going to spend years in court battling over stuff that, again, might come back to, oh, I guess we really wanted the same thing, but I just had this interpretation that we had to battle it, that, I had to win in a sense here or there. So I think this is such valuable information. Now, of course, we know that not every couple going through divorce has children. But if we can do better at understanding the main point of conflict with our soon to be ex, or honestly, again, I'm sure you see this as a therapist, after the decree is signed, how is that going to affect our children in the long run?
Are you saying how conflict is going to affect the children in the long run?
If we can better understand conflict and the where it comes from, how is that going to kind of trickle down to our kids?
Well, I can speak personally and I can speak professionally about how harmful constant conflict between two parents is. I'm a child of divorce. That's all, and I've seen both sides of it. And I can tell you now, when parents are constantly in a state of conflict, especially when it's in front of the kids, and even when it's not, it could be incredibly damaging to the children. And not just at that moment, but they look at their parents as models for relationships. Even if they're not married, you can still, co-parents can still model a partnership, a co-parenting partnership. And those kids, your kids learn from that, good or bad. And they will take that and they will remember it and they will model that for years and years to come in their own relationships. And even parents that, that make an effort to only have battles away from the kids still know that there's conflict. Kids from their earliest of ages are so perceptive. They know when their parents are stressed. They know when their parents are going through a hard time. They may not be, at a young age, they may not be able to verbalize it and say, Mom or Dad, what's wrong? But they know when their parents are in a stressful time. And when they see that over and over and over again, or whenever they get off the phone with the other parent, they see that stress, they know. And so the more parents can get along, and what I tell my clients, they don't have to be best friends or even friendly. You just have to be cordial.
Yeah.
And just you're co-parenting partners. You have the opportunity to lessen the amount of negativity from the divorce to a very, 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 very small amount. Parents have such an opportunity to make this they can make it something that's very traumatic, that's going to affect the kids for years and years and years to come. Or, as research has shown, they can minimize it so much so that there's not much of a difference. They just know that they have two homes instead of one. But
Yeah.
when the parents can model civility with each other, that's such a gift to the kids. I can't express that enough.
Yeah, I again think you bring up some really great points because as a parent coach too, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there of, you have a group of people who think we're just staying together for the kids. Like it's not, I don't love it. Like it's not a super healthy relationship, but in their mind, having a home with two parents and the kids in it, that seems to be the ultimate goal. But you're right, like our kids are always watching us. And I think it's so important to remember that you said, it's our job to model safe and healthy relationships for them. And if you really think about it, would you want your child to be in a marriage like you're in? Just kind of sticking it out for the kids, right? And there's research out there too that says it's not necessarily the divorce that's going to be traumatic for the children. It's the high conflict co-parenting situation that actually affects them more. And then, of course, that can trickle down to academics, behavior, emotions, all the whole basket of things. So I'm glad that you brought that up because again, as we navigate through this, as people are going through divorce, the things that we're doing and our kids are seeing, or even what we don't think they see, is really going to have an effect on them. Now, you, again, work in a lot of high conflict situations. I'm not all of them, but some of them. And so obviously listening, communication, that those are some patterns that you see. Are there any other patterns that you're seeing are very common in high conflict situations that you wish like, oh, if you would just understand like that this is actually the issue, we could get through this so much better for everyone?
There's two.
Okay.
People in high conflict situations, they assume the worst intention of the other
Mm,
person. No matter what is said, no matter how plainly it is said, and it could be very neutral or even positive, the other person, because of how conflicted their relationship is,
Yeah.
always assumes the worst intention out of the other person. And they do it with each other. It's a cycle. It's back and forth like a tennis match. And so no matter what is proposed, no matter what is discussed, no matter what is verbalized, it's always going to raise, what did you just say? No, and it's going to make a conflict. And I've seen it time and time again. Somebody will say something absolutely benign. Nothing. It means there was no intent behind it. And I can see the other person going, wait, oh, 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 getting all upset and getting all twisted out of shape. And I would, I sometimes I would say, can you tell me what offended you so much out of that statement? And we would talk about that. And in the process of trying to come to a point in which they don't get offended so easily by everything they say. And so that's part of the process of getting to a point in which they can get along better. But that's one point. Another
Yeah.
thing that I see is they don't they always feel like in a discussion in a conflict that you either agree or disagree. There and the only so that the important thing to remember is that good listening does not require agreement. You can listen to somebody and acknowledge what they're saying, understand what they're saying, make them feel respected, help them feel respected, but not agree with them. That is possible.
Mm.
And so they don't. A lot of people don't think that that's possible. That you have to. That you can't disagree. Um, and so I've seen it in conversations with my clients that we get to a point in which they don't agree with each other, but the temperature in the room is much lower because they've all been heard. They've all felt acknowledged. Both sides will talk about what the other person wants, and that helps reach a point in mediation in which they can each take away something. It's rare in mediation, unless they both agree with what we're talking about, But it's rare in mediation which one side gets everything and the other side gets very little. That's not really what mediation's about. What mediation's about is each person taking away something.
Yeah.
They get something rather than nothing. And so that's really that's a really good thing with this concept is that they don't have to agree with each other to feel acknowledged. Okay. And that really helps with the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, which can kind of seem, again, I think some listeners are like, well, wait a minute, if I don't get what I want, then why would I be happy about that? Why would I be okay with that?
Because a lot of times conflict is over something that is really not that important to the person. But because they've had this cycle of conflict over and over and over and over again, it starts very small. What is that saying? A mountain out of a molehill. It
Yep.
starts as a little molehill, and then they go to this defensive posture, and they don't listen to each other, and they're thinking of their rebuttal, and all these different things we talked about. And all of a sudden, this tiny little thing, what color should I put on the button of this shirt, is this huge battle that
Yeah.
really doesn't need to exist. And then that corrodes the relationship when they battle over everything. Because, everything. The relationship just corrodes away. And so that's why listening is so important. And and not just couples, friends, family, business associates, people that can't genuinely listen to each other and discuss what they want and hear what the other person wants,
Yeah.
that's a relationship that's probably not going to last. And if it does, it's not going to be peaceful.
Yeah.
So it's so important to listen, genuinely.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so kind of as you're talking about this, one thing that keeps coming up for me, and obviously you are going to have a lot more insight on this as a therapist as well. But really kind of what's generating in my mind is through my training and education, we talk about, or I was taught about, we have an emotional mind, we have a rational mind, but then we have wise mind. And that kind of sounds like where you're helping your clients get to is let's not lead from just the emotional mind, not just the rational mind, but really that wise mind where both of them are working together to make the best outcomes or decisions.
I love that. When we reach a point in which they start working together, that is, that's what makes me skip down the hall at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When I can work with them to a point in which they get along, and I know that after the whole divorce has taken place and they're going to continue on with their lives, after we said our goodbyes. Um, and I know I've had a very small part in getting them to work together. I
Yeah.
I love that. It's what brings me, it brings me to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it's just more of a conversation point there. That's just kind of what was coming up for me. But
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like working in the divorce field can be, challenging at times. It can be emotionally draining for the professionals too, because we want to see our clients thrive as much as possible and to have the best outcome as possible throughout this journey. And so again, I just have a feeling that there might be a listener or two that's saying, all right, I feel seen. I feel like you nailed it on the head. I am the one who gets defensive. I'm the one who jumps to conclusion. And as much as I want to try in that moment to not do that, I feel like I can't. I go from 0 to 60. So if you could give them just one tip for the next time that they are in that situation to pause and not get defensive and to listen, to respond, not to react, what would it be?
To take a breath and to slow down. I know I've said this a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Um, they first of all, they need to, in their mind, they need to decide how important this relationship is to them.
Mm,
And it takes work. No matter how healthy a relationship is, all relationships, and not just personal ones, family and friends, And I mean, hopefully they take less work than hopefully you get more joy out of it than work. But to slow down, to take a breath, and to genuinely listen. And what happens is they get that reciprocation. So if they slow down, they take that breath, they start to listen, they start to respond about what the person wants. I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like, you really want to try this because of this and this. And then what will happen is the other person will start doing the same thing. So you model that reaction, you model that listening, you model that positive response, that active listening, and the other person will start to do it. It's instinctual. They're not going to keep screaming. They're not going to keep fighting when they see you trying to help the situation. When you slow down, you take that breath and you start listening to that other person and you start actively acknowledging what they want, the other person will return the favor. They won't even realize it, but they'll start returning the favor. And that's when, you've heard me say this term, that's when the temperature in the room is going to come down a lot. And the
Yeah.
body posture is going to, the body language is going to relax. And that's when you can have the most productive conversations when you do that. And that's really what makes mediation in a high conflict situation possible, is
Yeah.
when you can just get everybody to bring it down, bring their emotions down and relax. And I love seeing them when they reach that point in which they're talking back and forth. And you can see, without them actually smiling, you can see how happy they are that finally, with this person who is a obviously very important person in their lives, who's not just going to go away, they're finally having a constructive conversation.
Yeah.
That's it's really a joy to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's the ultimate goal, right? Like we want people who are listening in, who are going through divorce to know that yes, this might not be the plan that you had for your marriage, because no one goes into marriage thinking, I can't wait for us to go through the divorce process, as no one, has a baby and says, I can't wait to co-parent with you. This is going to be so fun. But we want to be able to give that support and that guidance so that it can be the best possible outcome with, this pivot in life and this unexpected change. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all of these tidbits. I think that it can not only be applied, obviously, to those going through divorce, but as you said, in so many different relationships in people's lives. Adya, the one question that I do want to ask, because again, we're really focused on making sure that people have a team behind them when they're going through divorce, not just, mediation, not just a lawyer, not just a financial person. But what are you seeing as people are navigating the divorce process? Maybe two other professionals that you wish every single person had, whether it was a coach or a financial person. What do you think?
I think if I have lots of colleagues that are parenting coaches that I think do fine work for somebody going through a divorce, and they can definitely be incredibly helpful to somebody going through this process. Also, I'm a huge advocate, not just as a former therapist myself, but I'm a huge advocate for somebody going through this, what is considered one of the most stressful situations that you can go through, to have their own therapist, not just for themselves, but also for the children. I am a huge advocate for getting the kids into staying some kind of therapy, and they have therapy for kids of all ages. Younger kids do play therapy, and it is very helpful for the kids to have an outlet to talk about this process, the stresses that they're seeing their family go through, and I think that could be very helpful to the kids. I think it could be very helpful to each of the adults going through it. There are many professionals. Also, one thing I recommend to each of my clients is that they get themselves, and you mentioned it, a financial advisor or a CPA, their own CPA, not the same CPA that their spouse uses, two separate CPAs, just to kind of make things a little bit more cut and clean. That I
Yeah.
think is also very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that's great advice. I feel like I could ask you a million more questions. And if our listeners have questions for you, I am going to have your website in the show notes so that they can get connected with you. But is there any other place that they should look for to get more information from you or learn more about your work?
There on my website, I have a blog that I'm very proud of, and I put a new article in every week. I think I just posted my 22nd article, and then I also have a page in which I put various articles from around the web and books, and also links that I think are very helpful to people that are going through the divorce. And those are all listed on my website. And I'm always available to talk over any kind of situation regarding divorce. And so if anybody wants to reach out, the numbers are there. And I appreciate Angie getting the chance to come talk.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. Listeners, again, make sure you go to the show notes so you can get connected with Adya and find all those amazing resources he has available for you. Thank you so much for your time. And listeners, we'll see you next time on the next discussion.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce Discussions podcast. If this was helpful, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next conversation. Visit thedivorcesupportcollective.com to explore resources and connect with our professionals. Until the next discussion, remember, you don't have to navigate this alone.